Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this Monday's edition of the Presence Posse Presents. And for those of you who are on daylight savings time in the States or not on daylight, I can't remember whether you're not on it or you are on it, but those of you who have changed your times, we're on the regular time. And those of you who are in Europe and Ireland and all that, we're an hour earlier. So if you don't catch us today, you are welcome to watch the replay, which will be in our free Facebook group, The Presence Posse. Just thought I'd get that out of the way right away. I've got Danielle McMahon with me.
And we'll be back to normal time next week.
And we'll be back to normal time next week. Thank you for saying that. Everybody, I think, has changed their clocks by then. So, yeah.
Yay.
We have a cool topic. Don't we always? Our topic this week is presence and abundance.
Abundance. Okay.
Nice. Sorry, presence and ambivalence. Because Bobby wrote something about abundance in the chat. And so I was thinking about what Bobby wrote, but it is presence and ambivalence. And when we were talking about presence and ambivalence and whether or not we were going to do this topic, Fred said, I'm not sure. And I thought that was a pretty good example of ambivalence.
He was ambivalent about it.
He was ambivalent. He was actually joking, but he was ambivalent. It's a good way to lead into the topic because ambivalence is many things, but it's basically another word for perhaps undecisiveness.
Confusion.
Of
Maybe
two minds.
dissonance.
Dissonance, yeah. In two minds, on the fence. I mean, there are so many ways of describing ambivalence, I think. I tend to say that ambivalence is having, for example, two choices that seem equal so that it's hard to choose which one. Like the pros and cons of each weigh out almost equal, seemingly, so that it's hard to choose.
So, do you have an example?
I can make one up. For people who like cats and dogs, and they're trying to decide whether to get a cat or a dog because they can only have one pet, and they love cats equally and dogs equally. There might not be any clear deciding factor.
So that they would be ambivalent about that decision.
Yeah. Which, I mean, to many people would seem like an easy choice because most people prefer one over the other. Or there may be rules. If you live in an apartment, you can have a cat but not a dog because dogs bark, but cats don't make really loud noises, generally speaking, or something like that. But it's an example of just not knowing what the best choice is.
So then how would you bring presence into that and how would it affect your ambivalence?
Well, one way of, and thank you for asking, one way of looking at it is, as we often talk about in the Presence Posse, whatever shows up in the moment for you can be a guiding light. You can use it to guide you towards presence. So if I'm in a situation where I'm Can you hear that in the background? It's Siri deciding she has something to say. Nej tack. I can use the experience of ambivalence to indicate that I need to get present. So if I don't know what to do, I can use that to slow down and stop and just be and allow whatever comes to me to come to me. Ambivalence will often trigger people to act or react. They may not even realize they're reacting. They're reacting to the ambivalence, to the confusion, to the feelings of insecurity, undecisiveness. They'll be reacting and they need to do something. Oh, I need to answer. I need to find an answer. I need to find a solution. I need to do something without realizing that they're actually reacting.
Yeah, so it definitely causes some discomfort for many people, right? So
yeah, it can feel very uncomfortable.
Willing to be present with the discomfort, then it won't cause you to react like that, right? It won't have the same, like I have to do something to resolve it. if you're just willing to be present with it. And the other thing that popped into my mind is if you're present with it, one of those animals in this situation, this example, may present themselves. Right? So then you can be present to that opportunity. And yeah. I have a different example of ambivalence, and it's something that actually just came up yesterday, and I didn't know the topic at the time, I don't think. So I was in a meeting, and something was brought up. This individual wanted to present a movie. And she's like the only person that's allowed to present this movie. So she's charging $500 to do it. And I had a very ambivalent reaction to that. I like the idea of the movie. I probably will go see the movie. Someone else has already paid the fee, so it's not up to me to pay the fee. But it was interesting to me that I had that feeling of ambivalence towards her charging, right? Like, I really have spent a fair amount of time this day saying, so why did I react like that? Where is that coming from? What, is it a mirror of my inability to value myself that way? Is it an inconsistency within her that I'm sensing? So I'm just being present with the ambivalence of, I know the action that I'm going to take, but I would like to be present to what and I'm not sure whether it's an underlying feeling or an underlying thought or whatever it is that might cause me to react to her when I see her in this setting, right? So I would like to be in a place of being present with her, not prejudging, not judging, not carrying this with me into this ambivalence into that interaction. So I thought it was an interesting synchronicity that came up for me. And then this was the topic, like, there's an ambivalence. Maybe you can help me be present with that.
We could actually play with that, but I really, really like the self-inquiry, like a way to, okay, what's going on with me, right? It's not the other person. This is one of the things that I think is the most fantastic thing about being present, call it that, being. And that is that people do things like they are in the world in the way that they are. However they express themselves in the world is their expression of themselves in the world. That's what it is. It's not they did this to me, right? If somebody, it's
right.
like, I tend to take the example of a person who gets drunk and gets in a car and starts driving, doesn't get drunk and get in the car and start driving with the intention of colliding with someone else, injuring someone else, maybe even killing someone else. They don't have that intention. It can be a consequence of them driving drunk, but it is not their intention. So it's not like he did this to me. It's like he did this and there were consequences. And when I hear you talk about your self-inquiry, you're getting present, it's like, what's going on with me? You're not doing anything to her. You're doing something. You're, as you say, for example, prejudging, or you have perhaps a thought or some sort of interpretation of the experience. Like maybe you think it's wrong for people to charge a lot of money for that kind of thing. It should be free. I mean, there are so many different ways of looking at it, but it starts with what's going on with me in this situation. And sometimes also, as you pointed out, there can be a hidden solution in there. And if I'm focusing on the discomfort and trying to do something about the discomfort associated with ambivalence, I may not see the solution because
Right.
my fear or whatever, my focus is elsewhere. My focus is on getting the discomfort out of the way and not being open to whatever is there and taking in what I may need to see or feel or discover. Does that make sense?
I think it does. And just, yeah. So as I was thinking of ambivalence and thought of all the different synonyms for it and all the opposites of it, so then opposite would be clarity. Does that seem reasonable? Like if you were clear about it, you wouldn't be ambivalent about it.
Mm.
So I have some clarity in the action that I'm going to take, and yet I still have some ambivalence about the interaction that
Mm-hmm.
may happen. So I want to be present with that until I feel capable of being who I would like to be, which is present. Yes,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for the actual what's actually happening in that moment, because I know that there's this, yeah, like that was a church meeting and she's charging a church that. So is that part of it? Like you're supposed to be charitable, you're supposed to I- mm.
Yeah.
There can be many layers to it,
All
I'm
right.
certain.
There's so many things going on here. Phone ringing, and even when I turn the sound off.
Talking.
I heard what sounded like emphasis when I hear you say it's a church meeting and whether you should charge the church. And there was sort of like
Right? Is
an
that
energy in the word in the church. And then I heard you say something about should we be charitable for church? And so you're questioning what's going on. Where's my what am I focusing on? What are my interpretations, my assumptions, my beliefs about
right?
a situation? And then projecting it, to use that word, on this person. Like it could be this person should be doing this because I think that
Yeah,
the
and it's
situation.
always like within the mastering the brain game course that I teach, there's this thing that there is no reality, there is only perspective, right? So there's only my filters that I run it through to experience it. So I'm checking all those filters, right? Like the what have I been conditioned about money? What have I been conditioned about church? What have I been conditioned about? And how do I um, choose from there? Because then
Mhm.
it gives me a choice. If I realize how much is conditioning is put on me, is in my filter, then I can choose whether I want to leave it there or I want to remove it and I want to see it differently. I want to put a different filter in there. I don't want any filter in there. Then I'm at a choice point. But if I just react out of that automatic, then I think that's reality. I don't realize that it's my perception of
Yeah,
reality. Right. So,
the reality that I create. You mentioned this idea of clear as being like an antonym for ambivalence. And I agree with you in many respects. I'm also aware that it's possible to get clear on a situation as being ambivalent, like or my experience of the situation. So I'm clear that I am ambivalent about a situation. I don't have a clear preference one way or the other, or I don't have enough information to allow myself to take a decision, a very good, well-informed decision, for example. So I'm um, between a rock and a hard place, to use that expression. And sometimes that's where the clarity comes. It's like, this is what I have, and this is all that I have at the moment.
mhm.
And because I don't have anything else, and if there's some sort of deadline, I do actually now have to make a decision, then the only real thing I can do is choose or let someone else choose for me.
Mhm.
right? It's like, okay,
Well,
if I don't
right.
choose, somebody's going to choose.
Not
And then I'm
choosing
giving
is
my,
also a
which is
choice.
also a choice, was giving my power over to someone else, for example, but at least then maybe I can't be held responsible. And that might be a thing that I need to feel safe about. But sometimes the clarity comes in knowing that these two choices, for example, they there is no one clear direction for me. And so all I can do is choose. And then whatever I've chosen, I will learn something. And it's not necessarily that if I'd chosen the other one, it would have gone better. I wouldn't possibly know that at the time I made the choice. Otherwise, I would have chosen the other one because it
Mhm.
would have been obvious, right? So when it seems to be this one or this one, and I really don't know which one is better, so I just choose one, then it's having the presence again, or choosing the presence to allow whatever needs to unfold, and taking whatever action I may need to take, or being with whatever I need to be with. And then learning from that, not beating myself up about whatever might not have worked, and it may have worked just fine.
Or
That's
get
also
into
learning.
the coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah, it's like there's no point in doing that. It's like, what did I need to know about this that I didn't know before? Because it's so easy to do that. Oh, I should have known. Well, if you had known, you would have chosen that instead of that, right? So there was a piece of the puzzle missing, and you needed to try that out to find out what it was. And then if you thought that it might go that way, and then you chose that and it went the way you thought it, which wasn't good, well, now you know, don't you? Because if you really had known, you probably wouldn't have chosen it, right? So there's this clarity around not having a clear alternative. That is clarity also. I just wanted to mention that.
Mhm. Yeah. There was something else that came up as you were talking, and now I've forgotten what it was, but
You want to take a moment?
the idea of being present within ambivalence can certainly create that experience of clarity within it, right? It can also, I think, lead to a different level of inspiration. So if you're present, and I don't know that you can be present to the discomfort. I was going to say you're present to the ambivalence, and that causes you to be comfortable within it. So, to an extent, I think that is true. But you can also be present with the discomfort, and the discomfort doesn't necessarily leave, right? You can still have it. You can still be. There's such a difference, though, in the feeling of being present to ambivalence in a sense of curiosity, like, how is this going to play out? And there isn't a right or wrong. They both feel equally attractive or not, right? So there isn't that judgment. There isn't that um, I have to do the right thing, as you're saying, because either one of them will end up giving you information. That's what it was even if you have an idea about how one choice will go, you make that choice and it goes that way, and it's not great in your estimation, it's not joyful or whatever you would have liked for it to be, then you know, but you only know for that experience. Because if you're given the same ambivalent choice again, perhaps you'll draw from that and make the different choice, but you still don't know how the same choice would play out in a different situation, timing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so being present is just um, expansive. Yeah, it gives
Good
you,
word.
yeah, it gives
Expansive.
you a much bigger field. Than we did that field of possibilities. I didn't get to hear what all you said about it, but that's the way it feels to me as the field increases. So if you're ambivalent about these two choices, and I had a friend of a friend who used to do this all the time when they're trying to make a choice, they would just keep adding things, right? So instead of narrowing down the choices, they were expanding the
Oh,
choices.
goodness. Yeah.
And to come to a decision, that's not necessarily the best way, but it also provides you with not just this or that, right? There's
Yeah.
varying degrees of this or
Yeah.
that, or there's completely different. So,
Yeah. And I like that question of how about a completely different perspective? And I will very often talk to clients and ask them, are you willing to hear another perspective? And then if they say yes, and they generally do, inviting another perspective. And very often they'll say, I never thought of that. I've never looked at it that way.
mm-hmm.
And I say, okay, well, how does it feel now that you know that there's actually another way to look at it, another choice? Oh, well, it's, and then there's a world of, as you say, possibilities that open up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, because you talked about being present to discomfort. You've mentioned it a couple of times, and it's actually, I think, quite important when it comes to ambivalence or any. I mean, we've had the topic on what do we call them? Unwanted feelings or uncomfortable feelings or whatever.
Okay.
So ambivalence can feel uncomfortable. So being present to the discomfort, as you mentioned, we're not talking about focusing on the discomfort. What tends to happen when we're in pain, and I know I'm generalizing, so just so that's clear, what tends to happen when we feel discomfort or some sort of pain is we focus on it. And then we focus on how to stop it or how to make it less. And that is a very natural thing to do. When we talk about being present with discomfort, it's allowing it to be there. And your spaciousness, for example, that's a very good word. Even curiosity around it, it's focusing on it in a completely different way. It's focusing on not on the pain and the discomfort, but on what the discomfort is trying to tell me. The gold nuggets in the experience. So because what tends to happen, if you're focusing on the pain, the discomfort, you may actually enhance it. It becomes stronger. And then the need to stop it becomes stronger. Instead of, okay, there's discomfort in my body. What's that like? Where is it? Where do I feel it in my body? Okay, there's a tension there. Okay, what's that tension like? What's that trying to tell me? Can that be, is there another situation I've been in that's felt like this? What was that like? I'm playing around with it and getting curious about it and what opportunities are in there, rather than, oh, this is really uncomfortable. I have to make a decision because I want to stop the discomfort, and focusing on the discomfort and focusing on the. Does that make sense? So just for people who may not be very familiar with the practice of presence and what we mean by getting present to something, it does not mean that it will magnify your discomfort. It may feel stronger. You might, as you get present to a discomfort, notice that you feel it more. But it's not the same. It's the feel it more because it's telling you something, because you're curious around it and not afraid of it. Fear tends to create tension in the body, tightness in the body. And if there's not enough room to move, things can get more uncomfortable. So presence invites actually space. It invites opportunity, it invites breath, movement, things to move up and down, something I might be missing that I don't necessarily miss anymore because I'm now just allowing the discomfort to be there and getting curious around what it's trying to tell me. So for anybody watching, I hope that made sense. And please let me know if it did and if it was helpful at all. And you're more than welcome to share your experiences of ambivalence with us, and presence and ambivalence, of course. We welcome your comments.
Or your likes or your participation on any level.
Yes. Cheer us on. Show us some love. I'm kidding. Well, I'm not completely
Not
kidding, though.
really.
It's nice to get feedback.
Yeah. I was
We could go
watching
into an ego
something.
thing about that another time.
Yeah, I was watching something the other day and they were like, "Oh, we don't need that external validation. We know we're all good." And then they got some external validation. They were like, "Yes, external
Yeah.
validation."
It's like, I'm going to be honest about that. It's the thing about the ego, and I love listening to Fred talk about ego. Um, yeah, I mean, we have egos, if you want to call it that. And yeah, so acknowledge that. Don't make it a big deal. There's nothing wrong with an ego. It's what we do with it and how we use it, I guess, or don't. That's a thing. But I mean, having an
Well,
ego,
and I think how much we identify with it.
yeah.
You know, the part of presence to me is to
Thanks,
be
Rosalie.
able to be in the observer role and not be identified with
Yeah.
the emotion, the thought, the situation, the circumstances, the whatever, right? Like presence gives you that spaciousness to observe it. Like it's not who you are, it's what's happening. It's just a different feel
Hmm.
of showing up for whatever is going on for me in the situation that I'm in. Like you said, there's it's brought up a lot of opportunity for um, self-inquiry, for sorting through my
Hmm.
filters and my perspective and where it could be coming from and where it might also could be coming from and where, so I've gotten layers and layers of things that I get to look at and make choices about. Whether they affect this particular ambivalence, it brought them up. So I have that, as you say, like little treasures, right? Like I always say, you can find treasures even in your traumas,
Hmm. Oh,
right?
definitely.
That's sort of my how I got here, right? Like I learned to find those treasures. And so now I understand that it's not about what happens, it's about how you move through it and what you move forward with. You know,
I notice that when I hear you talk about the inquiry, the self inquiry, excuse me, uh, there's, I mean, you're talking about judging or not judging another person, for example, or an action, not the person necessarily, but the action,
Mhm.
the choice. That is the beauty of curiosity and presence. It is non-judgmental towards ourselves, right? You're not judging yourself. You're saying, "Oh, I've got this, and this is showing up, and that's showing up," but you're not saying, "Oh, and I'm a bad person for that, and I shouldn't be thinking that way, and I shouldn't be," you know. You're just sort of
I
allowing that.
certainly have at points in my life, right? Like I really have had a very critical inner voice. I think all of us at some point realized that the way we talk to ourselves, we would not allow anyone else to talk to us, right? We wouldn't tolerate that from somebody else.
No,
The
no
things
way.
that go through our mind, we don't want put up on a screen for other people to read or see, you know. So if that's true, then for me, that's when I started to say, well, I'd like to be able to be that authentic, that translucent, that I don't care if what I'm thinking is put up on a screen because it wouldn't be unkind to me or to anyone else, right? Like it would just be a kinder voice. So that's what began, some of the process of being able to be present and to be curious. That was a big thing for me was to substitute judgment with curiosity,
Hmm.
right?
And
That
just for anybody watching, it's trainable.
yeah, I wasn't born this way,
No, well, we might have been born I mean, we might have been born
right?
curious. I tend to think we were, and then somehow it ends up being we become judgmental of ourselves and others, and that is trained, and then we can train it away and come back to
Right.
curiosity. There
And we're
is
often ask me about training horses, and the horse trainer, the horse whisperer that I worked with said that horses learn on this plane rather than we kind of build on
Mm.
thoughts. Like we learn letters, we learn words, we learn sentences, we learn paragraphs. They don't do that, right? Like they either bite or they don't bite
Oh, yeah.
people. Either kick or they don't kick people. And you can train them back and forth along that as many times as you want. You can train them not to, and then they start doing it and it's tolerated and they've been trained to. And then you can train them back to be safe around people again. Somebody can take that for granted and let them go back to, right? Like you can train them back and forth. So the freedom in that for me was that you can't ruin them.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
it's always trainable. So even if you believe that you've reached a certain level of, so let me say for myself, if I believe that I have reached a certain level of not being judgmental and I find myself judging something or someone, I don't have to beat myself up about it, and it won't help if I do. So I just might as well go, that's not who I choose to be. How can I make a different choice?
Yeah.
Right? What's influencing this choice? What can I change within that, let go of, within that? Untrain.
The beauty in what you say, and there's a lot of beauty in what you say, but one of the things that comes to me is when we beat ourselves up, I shouldn't be that way. I shouldn't have done that. I could have been so stupid. Whatever we say to ourselves, self-deprecatory comments and judgments, is we don't learn. We get stuck
Mm,
in the loopholes of the I shouldn't have done and I'm bad and I'm stupid and blah, 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 blah. And it goes on and on and on and on. Instead of what you're talking about is like, what was it? What was it that happened? What's going on in me? What thoughts do I have? What automatic reactions am I having? Feelings do I have that I can do something about? And then it kind of reminds me of the horses. It's like, okay, I'm doing this. And where do okay, I would rather do this, or I need to learn how to do this. And I can actually train myself to do that.
mhm.
And maybe a situation shows up where I'm boop back there, but I know that I'd like to be there. So guess what? I get to do the same thing. I had to train myself,
Mhm.
right? And this becomes stronger. So this would be where I would like to be, becomes then something really, in my experience anyway, something really strong has to happen for me to go back here. And
Yeah,
then it's quicker to get to here because I've been here so much.
right.
Because once I get here and I've been there for a while, it's like I forget that I was ever this. Right? I just don't need it anymore.
Yeah, somebody I was working with called that the curse of wisdom,
Hmm.
right? So sometimes when you have learned things well enough for them to be wisdom, then you forget that you never knew that, right? Like there was a time when you didn't, or that other people don't. So then you think if you're, especially in a place of teaching, speaking, coaching, whatever this place might be that you are in, that you don't think that's enough. You have to give more. It has to be more profound. It has to be right where you just take the things that you have um, made wisdom in your life for granted,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
It's like we forget where we were. I
yeah.
think some those people who journal,
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of a blessing in that because
Mm-hmm.
they can go back and read who they were and
Yeah.
remember it. Oh God, yeah, I used to do that. Because it's we do actually. That might sound a bit weird, but we forget. We forget who we were once we start releasing things. We don't need them anymore. We don't need to carry them.
Yeah.
And the I've actually met people. It's very interesting, and I would actually consider this a form of bypassing, where they they claim to be so present that they actually don't deal with things that they've done, ways they've treated other people, because that's
Mhm.
not happening anymore. It happened a half hour ago, right? That's not really presence. That's a way to avoid taking responsibility for one's own actions and avoid being present to what's going on with me,
Mhm.
right? It's not about, oh, well, that was half an hour ago. I'm not doing it anymore. So I don't need to look at this. That's, yeah, it's really defensive by the sound of it. And yeah, that's not what we mean by, what we mean by presence.
Yeah,
Presence is actually getting
presence
close
is
to
not
us.
another way to avoid responsibility. It's actually a
Yeah.
way to take responsibility.
Yeah.
It's like there's no out there. Everything out there is a reflection of in there,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Like if you take it to that extreme, then there's always something you can do to influence it,
mm-hmm.
you
That's
know?
it about big presence, right? You suddenly have a lot of power over your own life
Yeah.
because that's all you really have to deal with is yourself. But not in a way like I don't see other people. There's an inherent responsibility in presence. It just is there
Yeah.
when we're really present.
Yeah. So I don't know if there are more situations where we need to discuss ambivalence or if
I have
that
one.
it's okay. Let's
I'm
do
going to
it,
bring in Bobby, who's not here, but who often talks about time travel.
right?
Because we've been talking about ambivalence and the feeling of discomfort that may be associated with being an ambivalent to a situation. So the discomfort is likely connected to some form of time travel. I would I would claim, because it's my not being able to choose, for example, not having the information I need yet. There's no, unless there actually is a threat on my life, there's no threat on my life. So what's the discomfort about? Right? What do I think is going to happen? Right? If I can't choose one or another and I feel stuck or whatever I feel, what am I afraid of if I'm not making a choice? I imagine that it may be because I'm afraid of a particular consequence, like something somebody might say or something going wrong. And then I'm living in that future situation, right? I'm afraid that's going to happen instead of acknowledging that it might. It's not the same. Living in the future or living in the past is not the same as living in the moment right now. Because if I'm living in the future or the past, I'm likely living in fear of something happening or the pain of something that did already happen. But right now, as not being able to decide, it's just not being able to decide. It's not, unless it actually is life threatening, it isn't. And even when
Right.
it is, we don't have to be terrified,
So
actually.
if you get to the or go back to the example that you used of somebody drinking and getting in a vehicle, right? So if they're ambivalent about whether they should drive or not, and they've never caused harm by doing that, I would say they're more likely to do it. But once they have experienced that, one would hope that that would influence their decision and not in a bad way, right? Like in a way that it wouldn't be life threatening for them or someone else
Mm,
because they've had that experience. So I feel like, yeah, a lot of times we want to be present without bringing a past experience to that. But sometimes in that particular example, it wouldn't be a bad memory to have and to keep. So there are certainly times where um, our past can be instructive. Yes?
yes, I love that. I completely agree with you. I think the difference is, although, yeah, what I call living in, right? Like if I'm living in the future, so I'm terrified, or I'm living in the past, so I'm in pain or terrified or whatever I am. In that respect, the pain of the past may absolutely be instructive, right? It's like, this was a horrible thing. I injured someone. Definitely don't want to do that again. In that case, it's an
Right.
instructive, but without having to live there and beat myself up about it and hate myself and get drunk and get in a car because I really don't care about my own life and I may as well just die anyway. And then I end up potentially hurting somebody kind of thing, right? That could be a
Yeah. So
horrible
then,
vicious cycle, right?
right. Then again, it's like I've identified with that.
Yeah.
Like I haven't moved on from it. I've
Yeah.
identified with it. And so you can move on from it with the nugget, right? With the treasure, with the little gold, whatever, and leave the rest of it because that's not supportive of you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That
Yeah. And
situation
then
happened. You can't change it. It happened. What you can do is change what you do with it. So you can choose to beat yourself up about it and hate yourself and ruin your future or whatever, or you can learn what you need to learn, use it as a reminder to stay on your path towards something that is better for you and for other people. And that's the gold, right? Being present to what the situation is, not bring it with you and carry it as baggage and have it influence all of your choices and how you live your life and how you see yourself. And that's not being present to something.
and some of that is it's so deep that it's hard to access, I think
Oh, yeah.
sometimes. Like I participated in a series of workshops called Courageous Conversations, and we do these annually. We do these courageous conversations. And the woman that was doing Milagros Phillips was her name, and she was doing a presentation on racial amity, I believe. And she was saying that the genetics has shown that trauma from previous generations is in the genetics
Hmm.
of the next generation. And she also said that all humans are trauma informed. They've all been through some form of trauma, whether they were on the persecution part of it or the persecuted part of it or whatever. So all of that like is it's encoded in our biology. So to be able to make a choice from that level, I don't know whether it actually changes your biology, but it's a very deep level. And until you get through some of the superficial levels, you won't even get to that. Right? It's such a process that I believe we have to be kind to ourselves in that so that we can get to the deeper level and not then freak out because it came up again because it's just a different level. It's not the same thing. It may be the same theme, but it's not the same thing. So my grandson is here.
Ah.
Hi, baby. Do you hear him?
Yes.
Mama, mama.
Ah.
He doesn't want to be put down though. Mama doesn't want to let go because then he's gonna fuss. Oh
Ah.
no! He's not leaving. You'll be just fine. He didn't want to say hi. He wanted to say, ah!
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Want to play a little bit with we've talked about being present to ambivalence and about experiencing ambivalence. What about being ambivalent to presence? Do we want to play with that?
You're gonna have to say it again. I was
You were
distracted.
distracted by that adorable grandchild of yours. We've talked about being present to ambivalence and about the experience of ambivalence. Do you want to play with being ambivalent to presence?
Okay.
When you hear me say that, ambivalent to presence, and I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, what comes to mind for you? What happens in you?
Whether it's safe.
Mm.
Right? That was the first thing that came up is my ambivalence with presence is whether it's safe to be present. So um, I can feel that as the factor that would make me ambivalent. In some situations, being present to what I honestly think or feel feels dangerous to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So I can have it, I can have the presence, I can have the thought, but whether I am present enough to express it, safe enough to express it, is another thing. Yeah.
That's a great example. I think something that comes to mind for me is a lot of people. Now I'm speaking as a therapist and coach and all of that. My experience is that many people uh, feel challenged by, for example, anger or rage, where they would be loath to express the anger or rage for fear of hurting someone or repercussions on themselves or that
Mm,
kind of thing.
yeah. Yeah, that's definitely one of the and see, I feel like that's one of those things that's actually embedded in my DNA. Like I spoke my truth at some point and I got in trouble for it. And that hasn't necessarily happened in my current incarnation, but I still feel very strongly that it could. It's part of our story
Mm-hmm.
as women in particular, but
Mm.
also as people that teach spirituality. It wouldn't have to just be female, right? Like, I think often people that spoke their truth of spiritual knowing have been persecuted, have been tortured, have been
Mm-hmm.
killed, right? So and I see this a lot. I see that people are hesitant to call themselves spiritual teachers because and maybe it's because of that. That's my interpretation. That's my filter or perspective on it. Is that they're like one of my friends in particular that is a horse trainer, and she did this whole explanation of who she is and what she does, and you'll be a better person, not just a better writer and a better, but she's a spiritual teacher and she uses horses to do it, but she's not going to say that in those words, right? Like it's not the marketing that she wants to use, and I don't know why. I just assume that, right? Like that's not as attractive as getting to be a better horse person is. But
Mm-hmm.
she's saying it. You're going to be a better human being because you're a better horse person, because you're going to learn to be sensitive to frequencies. If you're going to learn to communicate with the horse, and that's how they communicate, then that's going to make you a better human being because you will sense that in others as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a byproduct of becoming more in connection with a being.
Hmm.
Mm. And that is part of presence, in my experience, is just being in a moment, really being. It's amazing how much is in that moment
Hmm.
and what I notice of other people and
Yeah.
their experiences. I mean, I can never be, and that is one of the things that, well, I'll speak from my own experience. I choose to, my perspective is I can never be 100% sure what another person's experience is, even though I may feel something in my body and
Mhm.
understand. Then it's my responsibility to check. I have the impression that blah, blah, blah. Is that your experience? And then allow them to tell the truth or lie. Again, not. I mean, there's one thing about, as you mentioned, being present to one's experience and then expressing one's experience.
Yeah.
I can feel anger and I can say I feel angry, but I may not want to say I feel angry. I can still feel the anger. I may not want to say I feel angry because there may be a situation where it doesn't seem safe or appropriate, or I don't want to open up to something.
Or beneficial.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
there's
a lot
those,
of times saying something like that opens other people up to the opportunity to bring whatever's going on with them, but not always. and acknowledging perhaps when a threshold has been overdone and owning that awareness as part responsible perhaps in training leading for change. Yes, boundaries. Boundaries. Mine and other people. Being present to a feeling doesn't automatically mean expressing that feeling. That is often a misunderstood thing. It's like I can feel my anger. It doesn't mean I have to suddenly rage at someone. That's not necessarily being present to my anger. That is reacting to the experience of anger.
Yeah.
And that's often a really important point. People think, oh, yeah, I'm present now because I feel angry and I'm just going to rage. Well, if you really feel like you can't, that is something you need to express, there are a few pillows in the corner kind of thing,
Right.
but it's
There are
not.
safe ways to do that,
Yeah.
and anger does, especially if it's been repressed for a period
Mm,
of time,
it needs an
need
outlet.
some physical outlet, right?
Yeah.
But that vague sense of it's not safe to, right, is my ambivalence, my with presence. Yeah.
Mm.
That's an interesting thing. I wouldn't have thought of that. So what do you think of when you think of ambivalence and presence? Ambivalence towards presence.
The first thing that comes to mind is the fear, right? The is it safe or not? And it can be whether or not it's safe to express something or put something into words, or the idea that by being present to something, for example, anger or grief's another one. Grief can
Mhm.
be overwhelming. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So being present to that means it's going to really hurt. So I don't want to be present to it. That's the kind of thing that people, I hear that kind of ambivalence from people. It's like, ooh, I don't want to get present to my anger because then I'm going to kill somebody, or I don't want to be present to my grief because it's just going to destroy me or whatever. Or I don't want to be present to my sexual urges because I might lose control, right? And harm someone. Those are the kinds of things that I will hear people say when it comes to presence, like, oh, I don't want to be present because being present makes it worse.
Mhm.
And so there's this ambivalence to presence. It's like, well, I understand that it's there's an opportunity there and it's calming there and it might help me with my trauma and help me be less reactive. And I mean, they've got sort of maybe knowledge of it or maybe even some experience of it. But then there's the other side of it. They go, well, yeah, but boy, the minute I got present to that trauma, boy, did I cry. And oh, it really hurt. And I was furious and I really wanted to break somebody's neck. And it's that whole sort of presence is good and not good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that becoming present in the process, right? You have to go through those overwhelming things because those things that we've judged, um, we've repressed, and then you do have an overreaction. For a long time, that's how I recognized whether things were current or
Mm,
not, right? If I overreacting, then it's not just current. It's something that I've kept for a while,
yeah.
and it touched it. This circumstance touched that. So that's, yeah, that's how I knew for a long time. Like, I had very little emotional ability when I was, say, 29. It wasn't until I was 30 that I really started to learn how to name emotions and claim emotions and survive emotions and not have to run away from them and whatever, repress
Yeah.
them. Ask them not to move when that's what they need to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, how to make yourself sick, for example. But there's another thing, like in my experience also, and that's a really good point I think you bring up. I remember And I was pretty old. Like I was 30, I'm not sure how old, 30 something, where I had the strangest sensation in my body, in like my belly area. It was really weird. I'm like, I didn't know what it was. So I just stayed with it. Again, presence is not focusing on things to make them go away or make them, although we can choose to do that because there can be
Mhm.
information in that as well. It's just being with that experience and not trying to change it into anything and allowing whatever, unpacking it, basically allowing itself to make itself known so that we know, yeah, what we're dealing with. It just being with it allowed me to understand that that what I was feeling was happy, and I had no idea. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I was 30 something, and I had never actually felt happy. But once I had that experience, and I had it more than once, especially, I knew what I was looking for. Like I knew which way to go and what it
Yeah.
was trying to tell me. But in the beginning, like the first time it happened, I was like, okay, that is the weirdest sensation. I've never had that before. I don't know what it is. So let's just stay with it. Imagine if I'd gotten scared of it or been ambivalent to
Mhm.
it, right? Ooh, I don't want to go there, and oh, this could be dangerous, and yeah, but and then back and forth, and then not actually staying and allowing it to be there and feeling it and letting it tell me what it is. Could have taken me forever to figure it out.
It's taken
But
me
very
forever
grateful
to
that
be
I just stopped
happy.
there. Yeah, now I know what it is to be happy, or at least feel happy.
Yeah.
So there is a treasure trove in a moment, an infinity of possibilities of experience in a moment. And we are experience. It's like, okay, we can say we're having experience, but we are experience. That's just basically what it is. So not being present is disconnecting from us, from the from being alive, being in the world, being. I'm looking at the clock. There are a couple of minutes left. And you have mentioned mastering the brain game. You've mentioned these courageous conversations, etc. And I'm just curious, do you want to share anything about um, anything you're offering at the moment, or how people can get in touch with you and why, or anything like that before we round
I
off
don't
today?
have anything right now that I'm offering other than if people want to reach out to me and um, talk, right? Whether we're a good fit and what work we could do together, I'm always open to that. Um, but my life has been very hectic for the last several months with the care of my mother and my
Yeah.
grandson, and that's been just fine, and that's been just what's taken up my time. So I don't have things planned. The courageous conversations is something that my church does here, and yeah, you're welcome to check it out on my Facebook page. I will probably post all of those. It'll be the same sorts of topics. This first topic is um, local race reparations. So
Mm.
I'm interested to hear from the Justice League of Lansing what they are doing in this regard. And we are doing one on neurodiversity, and we're doing one on Earth Day. We're going to actually do handprints in angel wings on our one of the walls of our buildings, and so people can then do the pictures with the angel wings. And we're going to plant bulbs and have a big Earth Day celebration and show the movie I Am Greta
Oh,
that
yeah.
that day and have a facilitated discussion afterwards. So that's three. We have more. I'll talk about them later. They start
Fantastic.
mid-March.
Fantastic. And you can remember, you can also contact Danielle via the Presence Posse free Facebook group. So if
Right.
you just go into the Facebook group, her contact information is also there, but you can also leave a message for her and ask her questions and stuff like that.
And I think that some of the things will be offered hybrid, but not all of them, probably.
Yeah, that's good to know that there's still some hybrid possibilities because a
Mhm,
lot of people are either or. But
mhm.
yeah, they're still out there. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you. And me, I'm starting another round of Oh, I'll put my contact information up there. I'm starting another round of my online course called Undefiable. And it's kind of like if you have a trailblazer in you and you're not being in the world as a trailblazer, the course Undefiable is a good place to start. It's a 12-week course, 10 modules with lessons and exercises. So it's training. You can choose between two options. One is self-study, and included in the self-study are 2 question and answer sessions. They're group sessions. Or you can choose supportive self-study, and then there are 4 group lessons, group teachings online, in addition to the 2 question and answer sessions. So you get more follow-up, I guess. I can check and make sure you're doing the exercises correctly. You can show me stuff or whatever. So those are the 2 options. If you go to my website, which is, you'll see at the bottom of the page, centermex.com, it is Center for Mastery and Excellence. You'll see information on Undefiable there and how you can sign up and how you choose between the regular option or the VIP option. So that's one thing I'm doing. And also can be contacted through the Presence Posse free Facebook group. And I do offer sessions online, coaching, therapy, distance healing. So if you're curious about what I do, you're more than welcome to contact me and we can have a chat and book a session and see how that works for you. Next week, the Presence Posse will be back. And as Danielle pointed out at the beginning, we'll be back at a regular time. And that will be, well, where I live in Oslo, Norway, it's 9 o'clock in the evening. In Ireland, it's 8 o'clock in the evening. And in different areas of the United States where the other Presence Posse members are, it will be at the regular time it is now, because you guys already changed your clocks.
Yes.
So again, in our free Facebook group, you will see when it is and what it is, because we don't know the topic yet. But you know it's always good.
And you're welcome to recommend topic suggestions.
Yeah. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about, and you're more than welcome to participate too. And next week, actually, is the live and interactive, you can be on camera and microphone with us on Zoom. So please join us. We would love to see your face and hear your voice on our Zoom interactive next Monday. So we will see you then. And thank you, Danielle, for this lovely talk on
Thank you.
ambivalence and presence. I learned a lot.
Me too.
So we will see you again. Those of you who are watching or watching the replay, please let us know what you think and ask us questions and share your experiences with us. And we will see you next week for the Presence Posse Presents. Bye for now.